So welcome to the 2021 annual meeting. We're doing things in a little different order this year. Usually I do the state of the club there at the end of the first range day, which is usually Saturday night. So you get me after work today. This year we're doing it again the way we did it last year. It's all socially distant. We're all remote, although if you're in one of the lucky states where one of your chapters has organized something tomorrow, people are going to go out and blow stuff up tomorrow during the day and then reconvene back here in the afternoon to continue the festivities. We've got a pretty decent lineup planned, including, like I said, some formal chapters are actually meeting and going and putting holes in paper tomorrow. So I expect that we'll come back after that and everyone will have all kinds of cool stories to tell about all the guns they shot. So this is the second time we have done a remote annual meeting. However, if you've been paying any attention over the last 18 months, it is definitely not the second time we've done live streams or Zoom meetings or any of that stuff. So what I want to do tonight is give a state of the club. I am Ed Gardner. I'm the executive director of the Liberal Gun Club. I am joined tonight on audio by Eric Myers and John White and Laura Smith. Laura is driving to said range day with her friends. So she will be chiming in when I get stuff wrong when we get to her slides. We want to make sure everybody knows who we are. We want to tell you a little bit about what's been going on last year. We want to give an update on membership and the instructional programs. So we'll have Eric and maybe Dave chime in on some of that. Laura's going to tell us a little bit about some of the outreach stuff we've been doing, the legal stuff, some of the politicking and whatnot. John's going to tell us all about the new merch that we have because this is a year of new merch. We're going to give our annual Keith Ellis Award at the end. And then later this evening, after a short break, we'll have our keynote. So, as I said, I'm Ed Gardner. I'm the executive director. Eric Myers is our director of membership and instruction. So he's got a big job. John White does all the merch. So if you bought something off the website, he's been in charge of making it happen. And there's some interesting and fun updates associated with that that we'll tell you about here in a few minutes. And Laura, did I already say Laura? I think I already said Laura. Laura's in charge of outreach. So she's the spokesperson, and she's the one that sits in front of cameras more often than not, or sits down and talks to press folk, or arranges for one of you folks to sit down and talk to press folks. And those are the 4 current active board members of the club. There's a number of other folks that are helping behind the scenes. We've got HK and Kyle and Clint helping out with the IT stuff. We've got Dave helping out with instruction. We have a young woman named Mariah who's helping out with some of the legal wrangling around what bills are sitting out there. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a few minutes. And I think that's it from named people. And then, of
Alessandro.
course, Alessandro, I'm so sorry. Well, he's not here.
He's working.
Alessandro Padovani, who is our absolutely amazing lead instructor who tells us how we're doing everything wrong and helps us do it better. And you'll be hearing from him later this weekend. But that's our agenda tonight. I'm going to blow through it, hopefully in much less than the hour that we have, and save some time for questions. If you have questions during this, drop them in the chat. Drop them in the live stream chat on the Discord server. And if I could ask somebody to pay attention to the Facebook private lounge, there might be questions that pop up there. If you have questions there, well, frankly, you should probably be on the Discord server. So maybe you should go click at the link at the top of the lounge and get on the Discord server, because if we can consolidate this, it'll make it easier. But we'll save time for questions at the end. Unless I see one that's absolutely burningly urgent to answer in the middle of the presentation, I'll save it to the end. So without further ado, I'm going to get right into it with things you may have missed. So the last 18 months has been challenging. And we had this version of this meeting last when was it, August or September? It was last sort of late summer, early fall, which was the first time we'd ever in 10 years had to do a meeting completely remotely. And we learned an enormous amount about how to do social media and how to do live streaming and how to do camera work and how to do audio work over the last 18 months. And our Discord server has taken the role of a hub in our social media for members, not total social media, just social media for members, right? So we have private Facebook groups for each chapter. We have a private Facebook group for the entirety of the club. We've got private sections on our internet forums off of our website, which is where we started. So if you've not been there, get your butt over to liberalgunclub.com, click on discussions, click on our forums, get registered. It's free. You do have to sign up with an email that actually works, and it is not directly associated with your membership account, but it is free and it's a great place where you can go get some answers and you don't have to, put your real name out there if you care about that sort of thing. But there's a private members section there where we validate folks. But Discord has really become that hub over the last 18 months of where folks go first for information. So if you have to be a member if you're watching this right now. So that means you should know how to get to the Discord server. If you don't, someone will drop a link into the Zoom chat. And I know folks dropped links into the member invite, into the invite for this particular meeting. So follow those links, ping an admin, get onto the Discord server. It's become huge. Also, over the last 18 months, obviously, our social distance learning program has really gotten into a really good cadence. We struggled for a while with how often to have classes. We finally settled on every 2 weeks to sort of try to mitigate some of the Zoom fatigue everybody was having. But we wanted to maintain a level of sort of momentum associated with all things firearms. And we've done a whole bunch of stuff. I'll talk about that towards the end of the thing about the new and fun things that we've been doing. But it's ranged across the spectrum. We've got experience panels representing underrepresented or potentially underrepresented gun owners to try to bring people into, not just into the fold, but put a face that they recognize to the whole story of gun ownership. We've got new merch that's shipping, finally, and we've started to make sure that it ships on a regular basis. So every 2 weeks, every other Friday, we got a guy, we give him a few bucks, he comes in, he packs up all our stuff, he sends it out to you guys. And that's been a huge deal. Tied to that, we have actual space in which to store our things. So it's no longer in John's garage. It's now in an actual office. We actually have a classroom attached to that office. We're subletting some space from a local company here in Massachusetts. So a real honest to God presence that we can sit down and meet with members and do stuff and actually do things like ship things out. Because doing stuff out of somebody's garage just doesn't scale. So real people doing real work, sending stuff out, which is fun. We did do a SCOTUS filing, right? So we did another New York case where we put an amicus brief, and we'll talk about that as we get through that. And we have experienced what I would call huge growth. So for better or for worse, 2021 is the first year that we've had to file anything more than a postcard with the IRS because you guys have just turned out in droves. And Eric will talk a little bit about that when we get to the growth section in the membership. So those are some of the things you might have missed. I'm going to go into some more detail. Eric's going to go into more detail. John's going to go into more detail. And a combination of Laura and I are going to go into more detail when it comes to her stuff since she's driving. This is our 11th annual meeting. And like I said, it's our second virtual. And I want to give a huge shout out to the Ohio chapter. It was supposed to be in person, and we canceled it after much anguish. When was that, Stephen? About a month ago, and pulled this virtual meeting together in the intervening space. It was supposed to be in person. It was supposed to be in Ohio. We were going to do cool CMP stuff, and then COVID just did it to us again. So Stephen and Joe and Uriah and the rest of the Ohio chapter put in a boatload of work to put on a meeting in person in Ohio, and then suddenly had to pivot to do this. So huge thanks to those guys. Couldn't have done this without you. can't do any of this without our members. So guys, keep that in mind if you want to host a meeting, if we can all get together in real life. This is how this stuff happens: is chapters put up their time, put up their people, find us the venues and do the things, and are gracious enough to be able to pivot and throw all that work out at the last second. So a huge shout out to Ohio. I think the next section I want to go through is, or actually I'm going to let Eric do most of it, is talk about membership, education, and demographics. We've spent a lot of time tuning this stuff. This should look like a pretty familiar presentation if you've been to any of the last couple of meetings, because we're trying to start to standardize these things so that we give you kind of the same information and you get a picture year over year. And Eric, if you're ready, you just tell me next slide and I'll rock and roll.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ed, and hi, everybody. As Ed mentioned, thank you all so much for the support, and thank you for being here again this year. Ed, you can go on to the next slide. First things that I want to run through is the numbers I run through every year. It's kind of where are we at with relation to where we were before. And I want to talk really briefly about the past several years, kind of culminating in where we're at today. So over the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen some pretty staggering growth. We've more than doubled in size over the last couple of years. Bringing us up from, I think when the Trump presidency started, we were under 1,500 members nationally. Now we're over 4,000 nationally. The forums have grown like gangbusters. We've actually now have over 6,000 people on there. I remember back in 2011, 2012 when I joined, I think there was, maybe 1,000 people on there at most. The other big thing that we've seen is the membership growth on Discord, as Ed mentioned, as well as on Facebook. So on Facebook, in the members lounge in the last year alone, we've added 400 new folks, which is a giant amount of growth for that particular venue. We've also seen the local chapters pick up and folks starting to communicate there. So some really good stuff is happening. As far as getting back into the formal chapter side of the house, we're now up to 32 formal chapters covering 36 states. In this last year, we're actually about to finish adding Arizona. They're actually all wrapped up, and I think they just had their vote. I'm waiting on some paperwork from them. We've got some other folks that are kind of in the works as well. So again, some great growth over the last several years. We've seen these numbers really pick up. The other thing that I want to point out here is if you haven't recently, and a big thank you to Clint Sand for getting this stuff going. He did a complete reorganization on the internal membership portal. So when you log into membership.theliberalgunclub.com and click on member resources, he's really updated it, made it look great, and it's current. So there's a lot of great discounts that we've been offered just as part of being our club. So whether you're a reloader and need some bullets, or whether you need some flip-flops from Combat Flip-Flops, check it out. We don't get a kickback for most of that stuff. It's just a member perk for you guys. Now on to the kind of the bad news side of the house. So you may or may not be aware of what our membership software is. It's a company called Wild Apricot. And back at the beginning of 2021, they decided in their infinite wisdom that switching from PayPal to anything else was now going to be mandatory. What that did to us as a club is it kind of nuked some of our membership simply because some folks would log in or they wouldn't log in but once every year or something along those lines. So we're actually down a little bit in revenue year to date, although last year 2020 was a great year for us. So I think there's a couple of things at play that we've got going on, that PayPal transition being the largest one. Ed, you can move on to the next slide. So now just talking briefly about instructors. So we're now up to 23 states covered. Dave has 7 new instructors currently in the pipeline. We're up almost 50% for total instructors. Last year during the virtual annual, we made a call out and asked all of you who are willing and able to help out in at least getting certified to teach the intro, welcome to range safety kind of class. So we've gone from 30, 40 total instructors up to 60. So great work. Thank you all for doing it. If you're interested in doing the instructor gig, it's a really low pressure thing. Dave will walk you through the process. You go onto the website, fill out a form, and we can get you rolling. And Dave, I'd completely agree with you. If you can do the intro, you can do the firearms familiarization. The only real question is, what kind of firearms you have to show. We've got a lot of great slides if you don't have them in person to show these folks. The other big thing is the total number of training requests. So we're up to about 400. Which again, that's down a little bit from last year, but considering what last year was and kind of how panicked some of our folks were about the previous president, not a big surprise there. We still need your help if you are an instructor or if you're not yet, but you're willing to put in the time. The Liberal Gun Club firearms familiarization course is currently accepted in the state of Massachusetts for people to get their carry license. We can do that in other states, but it's really up to the local folks to help us out with that. We don't have a team of lawyers that can push things through. So we need somebody on the local level that's willing to go figure out who we need to talk to and push on it. And then that kind of ties back to our one of our big initiatives. So for every single chapter that's out there and every chapter that's going to get created, the chapter presidents have the ability to name or use themselves if they're the rest of the folks there aren't willing to do it, a person who can get to be a certified instructor at no cost. The purpose of that is we want to have as many instructors in as many states as we can so that when we do local events, when you do local events, you've got somebody there who can help out the new folks, getting them up to speed. The other thing that's not on this page that I want to briefly mention, if you have any interest in this, you can jump on the CMP's webpage and start the process for becoming a certified CMP range officer. It's a fairly simple process for their level 1. They kind of walk you through all the basics. They give you all the material you need to know. And when you get through it, you get a fancy CMP vest to wear. So it gives us another level of legitimacy. If a range is asking, hey, do you guys have range officers for your event? Having a CMP certified range officer is always a good thing when you're talking to these ranges about doing a local event. So Ed, you can move on to the next slide, unless Dave has anything to throw in there on the instructor side. Dave's good. All right. So talking briefly about social media. This is actually still seeing some really tremendous growth. The Facebook base is up to 15,000 now. Twitter followers have jumped up quite a bit over the last year. That's largely due to the ongoing posts that are going on, both from the social distance learning program, as well as some of the things that we're syndicating. Forum use, as I already talked about, and when we talk about our overall reach, that's combining our overall post reach through Facebook is around 45,000 people a year. Obviously, the more contentious the post, the broader the audience, because that's how Facebook works. All right, so the next part. And it sounds like Mark had a question. So yes, that is correct, Mark. We have 4,000 active paid members. 15 people follow us on Facebook.
But not all of the people that follow us on Facebook like us.
Well, there is certainly a percentage of that. So this next section.
It's just one more question. It's people.
Yeah, that's people. Eric.
4,000 people, 15,000 quote unquote fans. Those are all people. The reach becomes it's a
People that have viewed it. Yeah,
so
that's the
people that viewed it.
impressions.
So it's I believe it's unique people. So sometimes we'll get stuff that reaches people that aren't likes, followers, or members.
Correct. So this is the next part that we always talk about or have been talking about for the last several years is how are we doing for the club? We send out an annual survey that has a lot of questions in it that you guys are great about answering. Overall response to the survey is up about 7% this year again, which it relates to about 500 out of the 4,000 people, so about a quarter. About 15% of the total base is actually filling out the survey. And what we do is kind of take a look at, how are people hearing about us? Are you willing to help out the club? If so, how? What are your skills? All these kind of things. And a couple of interesting notes here is, internet search is still the biggest one. Online news searches and Facebook are the next biggest ones. Lara is doing a great job doing the legal outreach and being the face of the club. More articles is obviously better for growth for us. But I was kind of surprised at how much content is getting shared on Facebook and how people are finding us through Facebook. That's the first time since we've been doing this that more people have found us on Facebook than through friends and family. So I think that's a good news story, broader reach. The other thing too, and I'll just talk about this, about half the people that respond are always interested in helping to volunteer. So if you're in that category and want to volunteer to help, start talking to us. You can shoot me a message via Discord, Facebook, whatever. What we're looking for to start with, if you don't have an active chapter, is getting that chapter up and running. If it's not a formal chapter, at least getting some formal range days up and running. So please reach out. The more community engagement that you can do with your fellow members, the better. You can go on to the next slide, Ed.
We're going to talk about positions on regulation before we move there.
Oh, I thought that was. I don't have that on the next slide.
Oh.
Nope, I don't. Okay, well, I'll talk about it then before we move on. So one of the final things that we always go through is the positions that we have on our website about regulation, gun regulation specifically. And the lowest ranked alignment that we have is 70%. The other positions that we have are in the 80 to 90% range. The reason that we check in on that is to make sure we're not totally out of touch with our membership base. We have some folks who can get pretty loud about, oh, you need to be doing this or you need to be doing that. But largely, a bulk of the members agree with the way that we're doing things and the positions that we're taking. So we always take suggestions during the annual survey. And if there's enough suggestions to make to merit us discussing adding something else on, we'll do it. But at this point, we're looking pretty good. So thanks you all for contributing to that. Okay, so that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that. One more note on the alignment with positions. Like everybody really needs to just go out to the website, click on the About Us, and go read them. There are only 4. They're pretty straightforward. They're pretty simple. Herding you cats has been my great pleasure for the last, I don't know, what year is this? For the last, since 2008 or 2009. Herding you guys has been a great pleasure, but it's a tough job. Coming up with something that we can get 80 to 90% of you to agree with is unheard of, I think, in liberal circles, because I'm not a member of any political party. I'm a Democrat. That's the quote, live and breathe by it. So those positions are unlikely to change anytime in the near future until you people answer these surveys in a way that tells us that we're off base. So I feel pretty good about where we're at with that. I personally would like to do more and have more forceful things. If you've listened to me or Laura or Eric or anybody else interviewed, you know that we've got opinions. But the official opinions of the club are all around root cause mitigation. And if you think if you think that's us being joking or it's funny or whatever, it's not. It's real, it's serious, and it's the primary position of the club. Is we want to get at the root causes of these problems and not spend time with ineffective laws. So those positions are our political position. If you find yourself in opposition to those, reach out to one of us. Let's have a conversation. I don't want to lose you because you don't understand where we're coming from, or we've worded something in an inappropriate way. But those are our positions. I find myself saying that with some regularity, so I figured this was a good opportunity to say it again. And I'll go to the next slide. So the next step is technically Lara's show, but I'm going to go ahead and run the slides and run the speaking, and then she will tell me when I get it wrong. So Lara's the national spokesperson. Yeah, trust me, she won't keep quiet if I've gotten it wrong. Lara's job is to talk to people, and part of her job is to talk to people sometimes we don't want to talk to, and that's not the press usually, by the way, because I love talking to the press. But she's the primary point of contact for all the press, the primary point of contact for the industry, the primary point of contact for pretty much anybody who's got questions. It goes through her, and the rest of us pick up the slack when she can't do something or needs a particular point of view that we don't have. So if you've been contacted by us over the last year or so, it's usually because of one of these requests have come through, and we need to find a human being that matches a particular demographic to answer a particular question from a particular reporter. So this year was different, obviously. So last year was different, but it was weirdly different. This year was consistently different with last year. So no big events happened. We had some chapter stuff, but we as a club did not go anywhere. We didn't go to GRBC. We didn't go to the FPC conference. We didn't go to, which I think might be the same thing. I keep getting those mixed up. We didn't go to any conferences. We didn't go, we rarely go to NRA, but we didn't go to NRA. NRA canceled theirs, I think, a day before we canceled ours, by the way. So that was fun. We got lots of invites, but for the same reason that we're doing this way now, we've declined everything. I'm not traveling nowhere, not yet. Lara's not traveling anywhere. Nobody's going nowhere. So this year was there was a lot less of the wonderful pictures that you see up on the screen of people sitting down and talking to folk. Or do you want to add to that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, and to be fair, the industry is very funny about it, right? Because the industry base is very rah-rah. There's no such thing as COVID. Let's all go in a room and have a super spreader event. But, you know, the people who are the higher-ups that make the decision are generally smarter than the average bear, and they are canceling the events at the last minute when in reality, kind of in the background, I think everybody knew they weren't happening. So nothing has happened in person. And if it did, the invites that we got for the in-person stuff, we turned down.
Yeah. So it's been a slow year from the typical outreach perspective. That said, we did do stuff, right? We've been guest lecturers. So David Yamane for the Gun Curious blog and the Gun Culture 2.0 blog, professor down in the Triangle, has a class called Sociology of Guns. You guys see those posts on our Facebook page and on our Twitter feed and on our blog because we syndicate his stuff because he speaks not for us, but with a very similar voice. So Lara was a guest lecturer for that. I was a guest lecturer in a firm research undergraduate program around gun safety and sort of just general education for how guns work before they launched into what can you do about violence. Vice did several interviews with a number of members in Florida. We're going to see that interview come out here in the next 2 months. Recoil did an article up on us. There's some really fabulous pictures from us from 2 years ago in our jerseys that I think Lara at one point called garish. but I think the rest of us finally kind of grown on us. We love those pictures. I should have probably used that picture in the slide. Laura and I have been on all sorts of podcasts. I'm sorry, Laura, go on.
I was going to say, I actually love the pictures too. And that article was interesting. It was written by a woman named Ashley Hoplinski. And some of you may know who she is. She was the curator for the Cody Museum. That's the historic firearms museum. She's probably one of the world experts on firearms. And I know her through events that aren't happening right now. So that's the kind of thing that, like, why we go to these events that other people that, you know, are mostly not us, is because I get to meet people like Ashley at it. So who then gets us an article in Recoil the month before the Chris Chang article.
Yeah, and we've been on a number of podcasts. I know Laura and I did a tag team on one. Was that the WTTA one? That was WTTA, right? Walk the Talk America?
That was WTTA. Yeah, that was really fun. Oh, and you know what I forgot to put on the slide is the other thing that came out of that in Nevada, the legislative outreach in Nevada.
The other outreach. And a number of podcasts, right? So I've started to lose track of how many times we're appearing in the press and how many times we're appearing in the gun press. So we'll comb through those links and make sure folks can get to them. But if you're not subscribed to the social media stuff, get subscribed to it because we post them there without fail. You want to talk about the Nevada thing before we go on to the Supreme Court?
Yeah. So one of the things we've really upped this year is our, amazingly, because I just haven't had a ton of time, the one thing that we could do was some more legislative and kind of behind the scenes outreach. And we didn't do as much, although Virginia certainly knocked it out of the park, and also a little more in Oregon for sure, going and doing the in-person. Of course, we can't do the in-person lobbying work or the in-person going and meeting with the legislators. But we've been asked to do some work kind of behind the scenes. And one of the things that happened is Walk the Talk America is a mental health and guns group that's working to destigmatize guns in the mental health industry, basically. And they got asked, the guy who runs it's based in Nevada, and they got asked to essentially talk with two women on the Nevada governor's staff because they were getting ready to write a red flag law. And Mike reached out with WTTA and said, hey, we have some people you need to talk to. We want to talk to you about why these laws don't work the way you think they work and what you need to do to make them better. And so Mike and I had a good 3 or 4 hour conversation with two women in the governor's office in Nevada. And it turned out that the bill they were going to write, they didn't write because of it, because they realized we talked about how those can affect victims of domestic violence and how those can be used to abuse, how the California one's too broad, and we talked about ones that are better. One of the ones that's much better is the one in Maine, although I don't particularly like any of them, but that's the kind of outreach we've been doing this year, and so that was a really great opportunity, and one of the reasons it happened was that they heard the podcast that Ed and I did.
So we've been trying to keep on track and getting folks out there. Right. The more they hear our name, the more they hear who we are, the more we get more stuff. And that's those are dividends that are starting to pay off. I've got two other things on here that I actually have dedicated slide for. We did file another amicus brief this year in another New York case. And if you've been paying attention to our website and the blog, you'll have noticed that we finally have a legislation tracker page. We finally settled on an ability to start tracking this stuff. And in a few moments, we'll tell you a little bit more about the how we're doing that. But the Supreme Court brief was July 20th. Somebody just so it was. Laura, do you want me to talk about it? Because we did this in conjunction with the organization called the Commonwealth Second Amendment that's here in Massachusetts. Our lead counsel.
Yeah, go ahead and talk about it.
Yeah, our lead counsel record was David Jensen, who helped us do the last one.
I don't know if they sell ammo on site.
It was somebody could one of the moderators should grab whoever's talking and mute them, please. Sorry about that. and it's a little more esoteric than our last one. We filled a gap that then got tagged on by a couple other groups. I can't even begin to explain what I think the legal argument was, because this is so not my strong suit. But as part of our outreach program and as part of our putting ourselves out there, we're finding places to insert ourselves into the conversation and getting our name on a Supreme Court amicus brief. This one, where we're the lead, was a huge deal. And David did a great job. And the court is still considering the entirety of the case last I checked. And Laura, if you want to add any extemporaneous comments to that, I can move on to the legislation tracker after.
Yeah, so what happened in that, it was definitely LawGeek stuff. But part of that, so there's kind of two functions of an amicus brief. One is to talk about something that you think a particular justice is going to be interested in. So our stuff was aimed at Kagan. And it's a very esoteric issue about that. Essentially, the way it boils down, the circuits are misapplying the law from Heller, which is the old SCOTUS decision saying there's an individual right to bear arms. And we're saying that they're misapplying it because they misunderstand a particular part of the history that was relied on to make that case. It would take me 40 minutes to explain all the underlying stuff to it, and it's very particular. But the whole idea was to aim at a particular justice so that she goes, oh, wait a minute, maybe there's a problem I hadn't considered. We did it in conjunction with COM2A, which is a group we've worked with before, and it was nice to be able to do. We do have some other stuff we're keeping an eye on to do for later, so that hopefully that it won't be quite so esoteric. So but this one, we had a purpose to it, but if you read it, you're going to go, I don't understand this. And frankly, as a lawyer, it took David and I hours of conversation even for me to understand it.
We're going to keep doing it. We're going to find other stuff to do, and stay tuned. Which brings us to the next thing that is sort of generally related to Laura's. Earlier this year, we launched our legislation tracker. Sorry about that. I can't speak English this evening. Where we are right now, it's limited to stuff that's in the U.S. Congress. Behind the scenes, we're actually evaluating bills in some of our larger, more liberal-leaning states, Massachusetts, Oregon, California, and I've now completely lost track of the other one that we have an intern that is helping us comb through this, and she's doing a really great job summarizing the bills and then circulating them amongst the leadership, and we're saying support, neutral, or hate it. So if you go out to the website and go under I believe the About Us section is a legislation tracker, you can see current status of some of the bills that are before the United States Congress. We're going to start rolling this out in a more sort of robust way to the individual states, especially the states in which laws are likely to get passed that we're going to hate. Massachusetts, California, Oregon, etc. So stay tuned for that. But this is the first try of us, putting some resource, paying a little bit of money to get a human being to start reading all this crap and giving us something that resembles a summary. If you're in one of those states, or if you're in a state that's likely to pass laws that we're going to hate, give us a line, and we can turn our friend Mariah onto your state's legislative history, and she can start producing these summaries in such a way that we can give you some ammunition to go to your local state capitol when it's safe and start having uncomfortable conversations with politicians. But you're going to be wearing a suit. You're not going to be carrying a gun.
Yeah. One thing to talk about that too. We do get some feedback about, oh my God, this horrible bill is in the pipeline. We have one person, and she has every state to look at. We don't put out an opinion on every single law that is ever suggested in every state, in part because for the most part, most of the stuff is never, ever, ever gonna do anything. And so for the things that kind of sound really alarming but aren't ever going to go anywhere, we just kind of tick a box. No, we're opposed, and keep going. We're not putting a ton of energy into those because we want Mariah to be paying attention to the stuff that might actually get passed, to the stuff that comes up, that we're like, oh, that might actually be something to worry about. And sometimes it's not the stuff that's in the press. So if you send it to us and we say, yeah, we know, it's not that we're ignoring you, it's that we're evaluating for actual likelihood of doing anything other than dying in committee.
Right. I can't tell you how many times I've said in an email back during one of these conversations, like, I don't see that's getting anywhere. So, but we do try to keep it real. And we do try to pay attention to what's going on. So, new resource for members, and stay tuned. There will be more. And Laura, I think that now we're on to your what's next. Obviously, we could continue to build our social media presence, although it's pretty decent. We could always use some help. Our legislative intern continues to evaluate pending legislation in various states. She does a pretty good job. If you think you have a good idea about some of this stuff and have a proclivity to writing dry legal summaries, let us know, because we could always use more help. Laura's got some interviews coming up with The Reload, which is Stephen's, say his last name for me.
Gazowski.
Thank you. New firearms-friendly publication. Stephen's been a conservative, I guess you can say, reporter, but he finally got sick of the crap at the place he was at and decided to go off and do his own thing. He's pretty fair. He's pretty balanced, not to borrow a phrase from the people we hate, and has been a friend of the club. But more importantly, his work has been legitimate reporting. So, don't shoot the messenger, listen to the message is sometimes something we all need to think about. Laura, you've got something in here about API Goa?
Yeah. So Chris Chang and Amy Dillon are on the board of API Goa, Asian Pacific Islander Gun Owners Association, which is a new industry group. And to give you guys a little background of how it came out and why it started to exist, there's been a lot of issues on social media in the gun world when Asian members of the gun community said, hey, we're really worried about this discrimination against us. They got an enormous amount of pushback from kind of even people we weren't expecting it to come from. People who are normally a little more level-headed. There is no such thing, why are you creating hate type garbage? And so a group of people, a guy named Patrick, some other people got together and said, hey, we really need our own organization because people aren't listening to us, and they're not listening to why people are getting into the firearms, and we think that they're missing the point, kind of how LGC started. And I'm friends with Chris and Amy, and we very, very rarely work with other organizations. We are extremely picky about that. Walk the Talk America is one of the only ones we work with. And I'm friends with an enormous number of people who run kind of semi-aligned organizations or organizations that you would be more sympathetic with, and I have to turn them down a lot. But API GOA really is doing this in a good way, and I haven't seen anything that makes me go, absolutely not. I went to their very first event. They got 22 new shooters out to the range in Northern California at their first event. And I went down and volunteered and helped out to show support for that, and it was great. And so we're going to do some more work with them and have some joint events, some joint new shooter events and that kind of thing in the next year. But I will say that it was one of the first events that both Chris and I have been to since COVID started. So it's, we're COVID's kind of keeping us off the range and away from big groups, but as hopefully things will start improving more in the spring, and we'll start doing more with that.
That of course is the lead off this slide is COVID continues to be a problem and slowing everything down. Got some goals here. We want to do more amicus briefs. I can never pronounce that properly the first time.
Yep.
We want to do a couple. I think we're starting to pay attention to even some state courts and trying to figure stuff out there. More lobbying. Virginia continues to do a great job. Laura, you've recently moved back to the capital of California and might be able to have some influence there and hopefully do some work in DC starting next summer. Our goal continues to be to reach those same new shooters. We got all kinds of programs. I'm going to talk about some of them in a few slides to refresh your memory on it, but that stuff has to be how we get our friends and family into it. So Eric put up on his slide about where people are hearing from us. They're hearing from us on Facebook, etc., but they're also hearing from us from friends and family. So to the extent that you can, you should tell folks about us, tell your friends, tell your family, and get folks out to the range. If you need to know how to do that safely, that's what the training programs are for. And then last but not least on your goals here, we have more press. I will talk to anybody about anything. Laura will talk to anybody about almost anything.
But the only press that I have ever turned down is One American News Network. They are literally the only. Well, I turned down Dana Loesch.
Yeah.
But in the background, said to her, "I'll talk to you," but I'm not getting on the show right now. But I do. I've met her in person, and the only people who I flat refuse to talk to are OANN. But any other press, I will do. One of the things, if you get a press inquiry, if you have a friend who's press or somebody calls you saying, "Hey, somebody said I know somebody and they said you're a liberal gun owner, do you want to do press?" Send them to me, please. We vet all of the press first, in part so that we can get them to the website and learning about root cause mitigation before they go onto the range with you or before they sit down and talk to you. So, and we have kind of a format that Ed and I both use, that I use more. And so send them my way, and then we're happily bouncing them back to you for the interview.
We've got folks in Florida that just did it recently. And if you've never talked to the press, it's kind of handy to have somebody who's done it before give you a little primer. So tell us when you get press inquiries, because that's one of the things we're here for, and we might be able to give them more information than they had before. And that concludes Laura's section. Anything you want to add before we go on to the merch?
No, just some people we didn't recognize before. David and Richard and Deb and Brian have all really helped with the legislative outreach. They're people who actually went and did some in-person stuff, even in the time of COVID. And so I wanted to add them to the thank you so much list.
Yeah, if you've not subscribed to the YouTube channel, those four names, I guess, are a regular recurrence there. We did a lobbying panel in the annual meeting last year, and then there was additional follow-up with folks on sort of how to do this and brainstorming and whatnot. So that's David and Brian and Deb. They're all from sort of the greater DC area and surrounding. And they are fabulous people. And if you want to hear them talk for yourself, we got YouTube videos. We can drop a link into the channel at some point to refresh your memory where that is. I think we're on to John. John, you ready to rock? Or you want me to do it? You're muted. Oh, you can't unmute yourself because I've taken that away from you. One moment, please. Why didn't I make you a co-host? John White, there he is.
Okay, hey, how are y'all doing?
There we go.
Thank you, Ed, and thanks all to the membership for showing up and for being members. It's really appreciated, and it's been very gratifying seeing the growth in the club and just seeing more people out there representing the fact that they are a liberal and they like guns, and that's a super thing. I'm the merch guy, and so we can go ahead on to the next slide, Ed. Around the beginning of the year, we were running low on some merchandise, and I sort of said to everybody, "Hey, do I want to order some more merchandise?" And with the old logo. And so I think Lara it's saying, "Well, we've been talking about a new logo. It's time to do it." So we created a new logo, and biggest thanks goes to Ivan Thelen, a member from California, now in Virginia, but he did the design for it. And there are a number of variations of it. The main thing we wanted to show in it is that we're not all just old white guys. And we wanted to be inclusive of and more reflective of our membership. Next slide.
Actually, before you go on, it's like this is pretty important because everybody hates change, and change is painful. Modernizing the look, we're not just old white guys that carry muskets, right? So you always on the right wing forums and the terrible comments on Facebook feeds. It's always about, oh, I bet you they're just fuds with shotguns. We're not. So we really wanted to go to a level of modernizing the look of the club. The old logo is still alive. It's still there. It's just not going to get used most of the time. It's got a special place in my heart. I have, a tremendous amount of affection for the patriotic nature of it. But at the end of the day, it's representing an old white guy with a single shot musket. And that's the last thing that I think I want to represent when I'm going and talking to politicians or press about modern gun owners. It's not about single shot muskets. It's not about double barrel shotguns, and it's not about old white guys. So that notion of inclusivity, that notion of modernizing the theme, and we snuck in a little bit of notions around, training's actually important. So it's not just about hunting. It's not just about hunting. It's not just about double barrel shotguns, and it's not just about white guys. It's about everybody, and it's about a lot more than that. So this logo, if you were in any of the design sessions, you would, I think you might laugh at us on how long it took for us to get to agreement on what we wanted to present here. To go from something that is pretty simple and classic to something that is also simple, but not classic and more modern was a heavy lift. I know not everybody loves it, but it's here to stay. And it's going to get its own trademark here shortly from the U.S. Trademark Office, and I am really, really pleased with how it turned out. It has gone. It's different from the other logos that I'm seeing. And just one more thing, John, before I turn it back over to you, if anybody can guess who the silhouette is, they get a cookie. So you can put that in chat. All right, John, it's back to you.
Okay, so here are our numbers from year to date for this year. They are down somewhat from 2020 because we sold out pretty much all of our available merchandise in 2020. And we are still in the process of sourcing merchandise with the new logo on it. So those numbers are much lower than they were last year. For some reason, I wasn't able to get numbers from last year, but that doesn't matter.
I think a little less than half is what it was. So I had slides in here before for 2020 and 2019. But to John's point, between supply chain problems and our own supply chain problems in terms of creating the merch and finding vendors that we like and that match our values and that can actually put the logo in the right place on a woman's shirt.
Yep. So that's what's going on with merch. I anticipate that we're going to be doing more. And so what I'm going to take the opportunity right now to announce our brand new vinyl morale patch. We have been wanting to make those for a very long time. They're in production right now as I speak. And so you may pre-order your LGC morale patches for 37% off if you use the code that's on the screen, effin' finally. We'll be shipping them in the middle of next month, and we're really excited to get those out there because people are going to be, I think they're going to be real popular. We are also going to be coming out with new designs on the morale patches, so stay tuned. Once we get these and they look right and they feel right, we'll be ordering more vinyl morale patches. Then also we're going to be updating the traditional cloth patches to the new logo. So keep your eyes tuned on merch. I'm going to be blasting your inbox each time we get a new product in. And so looking forward to giving you guys some more things to represent the club with. I haven't found a vendor yet for the LGC branded flamethrower, but one day I may be able to do that.
We may know an FFL that has become a flamethrower dealer, so we can figure that out. A couple other questions here and there. Yeah, there's the cloth patches. Some of them are Velcro backed. They're Velcro backed. We still have a fair number of patches in stock with the old logo, so don't be afraid to order a patch.
Hey, Ed.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to jump in here. You've got about a minute and a half before we really need to start moving over to the next Zoom meeting.
Oh, no, you don't, because that's not until 7. Or is he doing it at 6?
6, I think, is what he's on the schedule for.
All right, we'll check that in a second. We'll blow through this here in a second then. There's a couple of things, and, well, we'll get them set up because the last couple of things are pretty important. I do want to do another shout out to our social distance learning instructors. This year was, I'm sorry, John, we got new stuff. Keep an eye on the website, more stuff. The last 18 months have let us really build out our online training components. We've got dedicated pages on the website. We've moved from a weekly to bi-weekly because everybody was starting to get Zoom fatigued. But the bench doctor, Mr. Scott Richardson, who I don't believe is here this weekend because he's decided he want to go hunting, of all things, has been doing stuff. He's actually just recently become an FFL 07, so he's also going to be sort of our friendly FFL of choice, and a number of special guests. We launched something called Experience Panels after last year's annual meeting. Women in guns, disabilities in guns, African Americans, Asian Americans. I forgot to put the LGBT panel on there because it wasn't in the playlist. I need to yell at Paul about that. But basically, finding those folks who need a voice and then getting the hell out of the way and letting them talk. So if you've not seen any of these, you should go out and watch these. They're an hour or more of some outstanding, truthful content by the people that are experiencing it. We've also had a number of special guests, which is actually kind of a dovetail into the next shtick. But we've become friendly with a number of researchers. Miriam Betts did a presentation on Dimension firearms, but Devian Olam, who is our keynote speaker tonight, came to talk to us about gun safes. So people out in the world are starting to come to us and asking us, "Hey, would you like me to speak?" And sometimes we say yes because we like them. Always with an eye towards this is content that is useful and relevant to the membership. So the social distance learning program continues to be a consistent and I'm going to guess permanent effort on the part of the club. So we will continue to have some kind of regular content that people can consume. The pandemic's not over, so it's even more important because of that. But in perpetuity, I see this going nowhere. If you've not hit the YouTube channel up, hit the YouTube channel up. If you've not looked at the website for online training, look at the website for online training. Some of the same folks have been doing this year over year. If you're on Discord, you know these names. Paul, Kyle, Eris, Lonnie, who's presenting, I believe, tomorrow, Danielle. Danielle has over the last year has really helped us get our membership and scheduling in order. And then everyone that helps us day to day, if we need help and throw something out into the Discord channel, somebody always volunteers. So I can't thank those people enough. The very last thing before we go is 2019 was the first year that we gave what we call the Keith Ellis Memorial Community Service Award. And the purpose of this award was to recognize someone in the group who had made significant contributions to their local communities. Now, it didn't necessarily have to be about firearms, but if they were part of our club, it probably at least was peripherally related to that. Unfortunately, we lost Keith in early 2019, and that's what the genesis of the award came from. So the first recipient was him in memoriam. Last year, we gave it to our good friend Carl Cowan, who led some incredibly significant efforts locally in COVID response here in Massachusetts. And this year, I unfortunately have to announce the quote unquote winner, the recipient rather, of the Keith Ellis Memorial was Beverly Ann Blunt, who we lost in June of this year. Bev touched so many of our members' lives that I never met her. And I am stunned at how many people started pouring out respect for her and the work that she'd been doing. She was an enormous transgender activist. She was a big proponent of Second Amendment rights. She spent a great deal of time working on things that mattered not to her, but to her community, including working for an organization called Susan's Place. We have a friendly organization called the Liberal Gun Owners, which is on Facebook as well. And Randy wanted me to share at least a few sentences about her from his perspective. She was a tender-hearted and lovely soul, stalwartly dedicated to firearms, proud veteran of the U.S. Navy. And as a transgender woman, she joined that fight early in her experience during what he describes as the darker days of that movement. She's remembered for her incredible spirit, but more importantly for the love that she shared with her wife, Deborah, who she left behind back in June. So she's going to be terribly missed. But in June, after her passing, we did make a small contribution to one of her, to an organization that she was proud of. And then I've got two that I want to share with you now before we move over to lighter fare and Deviant Ollam. She was employed, I'm not sure it's quite the right word. She was very closely affiliated with this organization called Susan's Place, the largest transgender website. It's a place for folks to get information, education, and outreach. And also, if you look at the website, it's a peer support group. So folks that are going through these challenging life changes and recognizing themselves can go here and get help and get resource and find friendly voices. And they do occasionally run fundraisers. So if you're inclined, please visit the website. It's susans.org, and poke around there and find a cause that you care about to donate to, or if you happen to need that kind of support, it's a fabulous place from what I can tell, and she was deeply involved in it. And last but not least, which is sort of more directly to our general mission around root cause mitigation and violence mitigation, et cetera, is the Trevor Project. And we'd like to ask you all to click that link, and we'll drop it in the various places where you can actually click it. But it's thetrevorproject.org. It's the world's largest suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning young people. And they do fabulous work providing counseling and counselors. And if there is a place where you need to go to get help, either of those two resources is a good place to take advantage of. We'll probably be making another donation to the Trevor Project on behalf of Bev, and we all miss her dearly. So